be with me always, always, always.
I'd like to read now from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading, First Things First. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. That expression, first things first, is a piece of counsel often given to students of business techniques. It is the advice of practicality to those who aspire to worldly success. But according to Hermetic doctrine, as above, so below, that which works best on one level of life is often the best guide to what will work best on every level. If a person is true to his highest priorities, he will generally find that his other needs are fulfilled naturally as well. This is true, certainly, of the search for God. One of the greatest sayings of Jesus Christ was this simple sentence in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 6. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added unto you. Paramhansa Yogananda gave his elder brother Ananda a wonderful lesson in this truth. It was Ananda who had captured him and brought him back from his flight to the Himalayas, described by Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi. In Yogananda's book, we read how Ananda later challenged him in the city of Agra to pit his divine faith against such practical worldly considerations as the need for earning a living. Fearless before that challenge, the young aspirant agreed to go by train without any money to the nearby town of Vrindavan, not to miss a single meal in Vrindavan, and to find his way back to Agra without begging and without in any other way asking for help. In one of the most thrilling chapters in the book, Yogananda fulfilled all the conditions of the test. Yogananda continued the account. As the tale unfolded, my brother turned sober, then solemn. The law of demand and supply reaches into subtler realms than I had supposed. Ananda spoke with a spiritual enthusiasm never before noticeable. I understand for the first time your indifference to the vaults and vulgar accumulations of the world. Late as it was, my brother insisted that he receive Diksha, initiation, into Kriya Yoga. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 9th chapter, those who worship lesser gods go to their gods, but those who worship me come to me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. Welcome everyone to this morning's service. Welcome to those who are joining us online. For anyone who doesn't know us, my name is Suryadas and this is Aaron. And it is our great joy to be here today sharing in these beautiful teachings. Yogananda used to share a story about a young man who wanted to know God. He wanted to understand the mysteries of the universe, to know God's secrets. He wanted to give his life to God. And so he sought out a guru, and there was a great saint who lived just a few miles from the village where he grew up. And so he went to the home of the saint, to the ashram, and he prostrated himself before the saint, and he asked to be initiated into discipleship, into ashram life. And the guru accepted him and initiated him And he gave him only one instruction. He asked him to go back into the village every day and to gather wood from people who would donate it and bring the wood back to the ashram to be used for fires, for heat, and for cooking. And so this disciple took this to heart, and he did this act every day with intense focus, with devotion, and as his offering to God and Guru. And he was so one-pointed in this service that he barely noticed as the weeks went by, as the months went by, and as even the years went by. And then one day, he was unloading a bundle of wood that he had been carrying on his back at the ashram, and as he dropped the wood, some of it got tangled in his hair, and it ripped out a chunk of his hair. And to his surprise, he saw that the hair was white, and he realized that he had grown very old. And he started to think about his life, and he remembered that he came to his guru, he came to the ashram because he wanted to know God. He wanted to know God's secrets. And he started to think, what have I gained? What have I learned? Have I learned anything? And then he started to feel that he had wasted his entire life. And he began to cry. And as a teardrop began to fall from his eye, suddenly the guru was there, and he reached out his hand and he caught the teardrop, and he looked at the disciple affectionately, and he said, "Don't you know that if a tear of sorrow were to fall to the ground from a soul as great as you have become, there would be great suffering in the area for years?" And the disciple looked at him a little confusedly, and the guru said, "I see you do not know what you have become." And he said, through your devotion, through your one-pointed service to God and Guru, you have become a great saint. And he touched him at the spiritual eye, and he went into ecstasy, into the highest samadhi. And this disciple now understood completely the mysteries of the universe. He knew God's secrets, and most importantly, he knew God's bliss, God's joy. When we consider the idea of choosing God first, it is just important to think about how we do whatever we do as it is to consider what we do. Of course, we want to choose uplifting activities. For instance, if we're going to read books or watch movies, we want material that is uplifting, that supports our spiritual life. We want to spend time with people who uplift us and don't bring us down. But most of us cannot meditate around the clock. We all have responsibilities. Most of us have jobs. We have family members to care for. We have spiritual duties. So how do we do the service that we do? How do we do our jobs? Do we think of our own personal gain? Do we worry about how it affects us personally, whether we like or dislike the thing we are doing, whether we would prefer to be doing something else? Or do we just do whatever is before us, whatever is ours to do, with deep devotion as an offering to God and Guru in the way that the disciple did in this story? And if we do, then we too will come to know God. We will come to know God's secrets. I heard it said that Swami Kriyananda was once driving in his car. This would have been probably the mid to late 60s. And he turned on the radio, probably to listen to the news. And there was a man being interviewed on this radio show. And Swami knew, just from the quality of the man's voice, that he was a saint. And that man was Frank Laubach. And Swami pulled the car over and listened carefully to what the man had to say. Frank Laubach was a Protestant saint. You don't often hear those two words put together. Protestants are many good things, but they're not often considered to be saints. But in this man, it was true. He was a saint. He was a mystic. He was able to commune with God. And as a young man, he was sent to the Philippines as a missionary. He was sent to an island in the Philippines to convert the local people to Christianity. But when he arrived, he found that there were all these Muslims who were very devout, who loved God, who served God, who were kind to one another, who lived good lives. And he realized that these people did not need to be converted to Christianity. And so instead, he befriended them, and he helped them to overcome poverty and to learn and read and write. And he even went to some of their prayer meetings. And at one point, a man asked him, "Are you Islam now?" He said, "No, I'm a Christian, but I'm a friend of Islam." So he was a great soul. And during this period, he began to try an experiment. He thought, what if I could give 1 second in every minute that I'm awake to thinking of God? And so he began to attempt to do this. And it's an easy thing to do as far as what you do, but it's not so easy to actually do it. And so he struggled. Sometimes he was very successful. Sometimes he failed miserably. But he kept trying, and he kept trying. And over time, he began to be able to really focus on God, to feel God's presence. And then he was trying to think of God for 10 minutes out of every hour while he was awake. And soon he was not only thinking of God, but he was communing with God. He felt God's presence. He was guided by God's presence. At one point, he would get out his typewriter and he would ask Christ, his guru, to speak through his hands as he typed. And he would be amazed at some of the things that would come through this method. He became a great mystic through this process. He learned to practice the presence of God, to be in God's presence, to give himself to God all the time. Yogananda also advocated for this practice of the presence of God, and I'd like to share his words with you. The habit of being inwardly in the calm presence of God must be developed so that day and night that consciousness will remain steadfast. It is worth the effort, for to live in the consciousness of God is to be done with enslavement to disease, suffering, and fear. Just be with God. This is the be-all and end-all of life. If one resolves never to go to sleep at night without meditating and feeling the divine presence into one's life, if one resolves never to go to sleep at night without meditating and feeling the divine presence, into one's life will come happiness beyond all expectation. Effort is necessary, but that effort will make one a king enthroned in the kingdom of peace and joy. Time spent in the pursuit of extraterrestrial material things is a waste of man's precious opportunities to know God. I am telling you this from my heart. Blessed is he who makes up his mind never to rest until he has found God. And Yogananda wrote the poem, God, 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 which ends with these words: in waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any, God, God, God. So let us strive to bring God into every moment of our lives, to give him our every activity, our every thought, and especially to give him our love. As we open ourselves up to him, he will be able to lift our consciousness, and then we too will come to understand the mysteries of the universe. We too will know God's secrets, and most importantly, we will know his bliss.
This world is full of suffering and sorrow, isn't it? It's almost like something that we can't get away from, it seems like. It's a necessary part of life in this world. And yet, we strive to. We strive to find something meaningful, something deeper. And the average person strives through various material ends. Through getting a good job and a house and relationship and circumstances and position, let's say. And if you ask them why they are doing that, why they are so motivated to these things, they might tell you, well, if I can have more money, or if I can have a wonderful relationship, I might feel more security or feel more happiness. And all of these things essentially lead back to the desire for happiness, and or the desire to get away from suffering, isn't it? Kind of go hand in hand. And yet, time and time again, we find that those things that we look at in the world for actual happiness don't really satisfy us in the end. They found that people who won the lottery, they're happy more. They find themselves to be a little more happy than they were for about a month or two, and then they're back where they were from before. And what else? What else are you going to do that's so intensely meaningful as winning all of this money outwardly? What else are we going to do that's going to have a lasting effect on our consciousness? When I was in high school, I was really disillusioned. I don't know if you went through that experience. Actually, it was back when I was in junior high. And I just, I started getting this sense of the rat race, and just going to these classes that I had to go to, and society was making me do, that I had no interest in. It all seemed kind of empty. I couldn't find the meaning in it. It didn't seem meaningful to me at all. And I think it was in sophomore or junior year, they sit you down and they're like, okay, now you got to decide what you want to do, where you want to go, because then that decides all your classes you're going to take, and then where you'll go into college, and you're going to set you all up. It's like you got to make a decision. And I was just, I have no idea. What are you talking about? How am I supposed to figure that out? I don't have any interest in any of this stuff. So I was really disillusioned by that, and in some ways I kind of wondered if there was something wrong with me. I just thought, everybody else seems to kind of be able to make decisions, but I couldn't. None of it I could really put my energy into, and in a meaningful way. And I kind of petered out. I dropped out of high school. I took my proficiency exam, just to meet the requirement. My senior year, I did choir and drama, because I enjoyed them, and I thought, well, just to get through the last vestige of being a child at 17. But throughout that whole period of time, I was suffering so much because I had a hard time finding any meaning. And when there's no meaning, how do we motivate ourselves to do anything? How do we accomplish anything? And I guess other people were finding meaning in these other things, and so they were motivated to accomplish and to do the things that they were doing. I was motivated to sing because I found inspiration in that, and in drama it was fun. But I was struggling to have meaning. And I grew up in a yogic family. I grew up going to Ananda services in Santa Rosa. My mother and father were both Kriya Bonds. And so I had that. It wasn't forced on me, but it was in my sphere of influence. And so I was aware of it. but I had never really dedicated my energy to it to the point where I knew it for myself. I was intellectually understood. But when I was in high school, it was something that, well, that might be something to put energy into at a certain point. I actually learned to meditate when I was 16. And I learned to meditate. It wasn't a regular practice for me, but it was something that, and I found some inspiration from this path. But again, I hadn't dedicated myself to it, really. And near the end of that year, the end of my senior year in high school, I was fed up. I was done with feeling disillusioned about it, and I knew I needed to change something. I knew I needed to stop spinning my wheels, so to speak. And I knew I needed to develop a relationship with God. I needed to have a regular meditation practice and be able to have a relationship with God so that I could find something more meaningful. I knew God was it. I knew God was what was more meaningful. But I didn't really know it. I didn't really have that more tangible experience. So it was near the end of my senior year. I worked with my dad to work to earn the money so that I could go and do an internship at Ananda Village, and I went and did that. The day of my high school graduation, I was over at Ananda Village. I didn't go to the graduation. I was at Ananda Village starting the internship program there. And that trajectory changed my life. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't made that decision. But my energy was low. It was, like I said, very disillusioned. I was very indifferent about all the things that I was supposed to be doing. But when I was meditating deeply every day, and I was doing service, and I was doing the other practices, chanting and affirmations, and all of these things that were reminding me of God and were helping me to make the acquaintanceship of God, I found meaning in my life. Sorry. And it opened up a different perspective for me. It opened up a world for me that was rich and full of God. And when I was done with my senior year, if somebody had told me, "Do you think you'll ever want to become an electrical engineer?" and think you could do that, I would have said, "No way! No chance in hell would I ever do that." It was just the school requirements and what was needed. Thank you. What was needed, it was just way not something that I would be interested in. But through developing my life with God and having that be something that was my focus, I gradually learned that with God I could do anything that I set my mind to do. Because as I worked with God on the things that I was doing in my life, I was able to accomplish more than I ever thought I could. And when it was time that I needed to make some career change, I knew I could do it. I knew I could go back to school. And, I was scared of school. I was very disillusioned by it. I didn't like it. But I knew I could go back to it and embrace it with God. I knew I could do it with God and that God could do it through me. So it was through this whole experience of making the acquaintanceship of God that my life changed. It's the kind of thing I was thinking of. If you first meet somebody you're interested in, and you talk with them for a minute and exchange numbers, are you going to have the faith and the trust in that person after a brief meeting that they're not going to break your heart? That they're going to be with you for the rest of your life? No. You barely met them. You've briefly talked with them. You may be interested in them, but you're not going to have faith in them and trust them. For us to be able to have faith in God, which is a necessary part of a relationship with God, we have to develop that relationship. We have to go on dates with God. We have to spend time with God. We have to make God our constant companion. We have to develop a relationship. And we can have different kinds of relationships with people. People can be an acquaintance, we know them, and we kind of talk with them briefly. Or someone can be a good friend, or they can be a very intimate companion. And we those kinds of, they can have a deeper and deeper kind of relationship. And if we stick with it, if we spend the necessary time, what kind of time you spend with your intimate companion is different than you spend with an acquaintance, isn't it? If we spend that time with our intimate companion, we develop a deeper relationship. And if we spend that time with God, we develop a deeper relationship with God. And then God can come into our life and flow through our lives and change our lives. That's why we make the first things first, why we make God the first thing. Because all of those things that people are looking for happiness, it's really happiness, really, that we're looking for. We're motivated and we do those things, but it's really God, in the end, that we're looking for. It's really joy and peace, and that's God. And if we put God first, it's not then all of these things will be added unto you because then you did what you were supposed to do. It's if you put God first, you will find everything you're looking for because you're making a commitment to God and you're finding that relationship with God. So I wanted to share that because it's often something that's thought of as a compulsion. You should put God first. It's a duty to put God first. But really we should put God first because what do you put first? You put the most important thing first. That's what you do first. God is the most important thing in our life because he is everything that we've ever wanted, because he is what we're seeking, because he is all of those things that will be added unto you. So put God first in your life. Make him your constant companion, and he will illuminate your life.